Hey man, before we begin, I would recommend just heeding the advice of that Zach Hadel fish in the cinema. Just not spoil anything in the comments down below. That would be really respectful, man. Yeah. Please, seriously, don't spoil it in the comments. If you spoil it in the comments, then you could ruin people's life savings. Hell, I mean, there may be some obscure people who were saving up to place bets on what was going to happen in the amazing digital circus last act. They would have been saving up for theorizing and to see if their theories would come true in the cinema, and then it would all be ruined just because they accidentally read some of your spoiler comments. Oh, their life savings. Or I suppose you could just avoid the comments altogether. I don't know. Or maybe just watch Smiling and Friends instead.
Welcome to the Amazing Digital Review! I am your host and reviewer, and I'm going to give you the most jaw-dropping, heart-stopping, mind-bending review you've ever laid your eyes upon!
Bingo and Super and Peanuts too. Raga the text and make health more real. Day after 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 day.
Shout out to my brother-in-law for suggesting that I get into watching this series. It has been quite an intriguing endeavor to delve into not only this series, but to further delve into its source material, which I'll delve into more detail later for you people. So yes, today we are going to be looking at the internet viral sensation that is The Amazing Digital Circus, an original web series made by the independent online animation studio, Glitch Studios. And they've gotten so popular with this particular series particularly, I've repeated the word particularly, that they've literally made a cinematic release. I tell you, if there was ever a year for absolute success of YouTube dominating over mainstream Hollywood, it's this year. It's quite incredible in hindsight. Okay, side tangent. Seriously, YouTube is just dominating the cinemas right now, as well as television. You've got Iron Lung, you've got the finale of Smiling Friends, you've got this show, you've got Obsession, you've got Backrooms. It's quite the year for YouTubers, isn't it? Anyway, back on topic. The Amazing Digital Circus tells the story about a psychological nightmare with a sugar-coated design! On the surface level, it looks like a fairly goofy, cartoony show about characters getting into various hijinks in adventures. But what the story is actually about are real-life human beings who, through a series of events, find themselves curious enough to venture into an obscure abandoned building, curious enough to try on this virtual headset for a game called The Amazing Digital Circus, and the next moment they find themselves spawned into the game as goofy avatar characters, and they can't seem to get the headset off.
My! It appears a new human has entered this realm!
How do I take this headset off?
Just keep grabbing at it. That works for all of us.
What's going on? I put on some weird headset and now I'm here. Who are you people? Why can't I take it off? Where am I?
Let's just try to calm down.
So, the humans in these character avatars are trapped in this simulation and are forced to undergo a variety of adventures from this creative AI host by the name of Kane. Said adventures only exist to fulfill Kane's sense of entertainment and his ego. And because of Kane's lack of understanding of the human will to yearn for freedom, combined with his confused mistreatment of the humans, combined with personal issues from the humans themselves, the human characters find themselves going through an existential nightmare, in which they have to maintain their sanity seemingly for as long as the simulation remains active, because if they go insane, they become these glitchy monsters that are coined abstracted and then sent to the cellar so that they don't cause any more damage.
I've been looking for this. Thanks for keeping an eye on it, Coffee. I'm gonna head out. See ya.
Oh, Compo's been obstructed. That's okay.
What is that?
It might be that terrible thing I was talking about earlier when you reach your breaking point.
Huh?
So, right from the get-go with that premise, you can tell that the series is presenting a whole variety of goofy antics, but all throughout it, you can tell something is off. Very off about it. And naturally, the human characters want to leave. The current sane human characters consists as follows. Our main protagonist, Pomni, this doll lady by the name of Ragatha. Seriously, I just want to give her a hug. And Jax, a person who takes absolute pride in posing as an absolute jerk.
Nah, I've got keys everywhere, and you've all been fine. By the way, I may have left something in your room today, so let me know if you find it. You're not afraid of centipedes, are you?
Jax! That's literally my only fear. Why would you do this?
Together, they go through the varying adventures that Kane forces them to go to for his entertainment, however tormenting or self-reflective they may be. And despite the seemingly insurmountable odds, the human characters want to try to find a way to make things better, whether it be, or at the very least, all the characters simultaneously agreeing that things need to change for the better somehow. And don't worry, I will not spoil anything regarding what happens in episode 9 that premiered in The Amazing Digital Circus, the last act. The movie itself comprises of showcasing episode 8, which was approximately half an hour long, and you can watch on YouTube right now, as well as, of course, episode 9, which is an hour long. I will avoid spoilers. This is a spoiler-free review. With that said, I will go over my overall... In this review, I'm going to give my impressions of the entire series as a whole, not just the finale, as well as describing the key thematics and how this specific series differentiates from the source material that Gooseworks found inspiration from. And let's get the elephant out of the room. This series is not going to be for everybody. Yes, despite the fact that the series is a viral sensation on the internet with thousands upon millions and billions of views, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. You see, even though the series does present itself as comedic, it certainly has its funny bits, don't get me wrong, but I didn't find myself laughing out loud a lot of the time. Honestly, I found myself invested in the series more for its underlying plot line. As the series goes along, you'll find that it's much more focused on being more character-driven, which appropriately enough does tie into the key thematic that the series wants to address. However, because of the specific way it does it, it will likely take a while for a lot of people to really warm up to the series if they give it a chance. I suppose you could say that this is kind of a Marmite series, a little bit of Marmite in there. What do I mean by Marmite? For those of you who don't know, the term Marmite is basically this food metaphor to refer to entertainment. Marmite, the sour food supplement, is of required taste, and basically the conclusion is that you either like it or you don't. So when you apply Marmite to entertainment, you say, this stuff is like Marmite, you either like it or you don't. Like, for example, like the Hunger Games film adaptations, Attack on Titan Season 4. You either like it or you don't. I could point to Attack on Titan Season 4, but I think the best example I can think of in this case would be the Hunger Games film adaptations. That's a Marmite series. You either like it or you don't.
Honey, I'm home. Marmite, what are you doing?
I'm sleeping with your wife, John.
Yeah. You are.
With The Amazing Digital Circus, it's Marmite-ish in the fact that its overall tone and pacing can either turn people off or invest them into watching the rest of the show. Obviously, it was successful enough to win over a lot of people, even though from what I understand, the fan base, especially on Reddit, is highly divisive, and I would not encourage interacting with those people. The show can be a bit of a drag to get through. They're just kind of going through the motions. But at the same time, if you're paying attention, there is meaningful character development throughout the initial first 6 episodes. And all the character development is paid off meaningfully well in the last 3 episodes of the series. I'd say by the time that the series reached episodes 7 and 8, the series really got upgraded, not just in its visual capacity, but also in its humor and its writing and its pacing and its storytelling intrigue. Obviously, there's the benefit of having major answers finally be implied to be revealed and whatnot. Having completed episode 9, all the major story elements are mostly paid off in a satisfying way. And no doubt, there's going to be fans who will be speculating about every intricate detail of the series for days, because this kind of series is appealing to the young adult demographic on the internet, specifically the type that loves to mingle over the details and make theory videos and speculate on little details and finding out the conspiracies and what it means for the character development and whatnot. And I sense that the creators of the show made the show like that on purpose, with the Easter eggs you can find within each individual episode and the foreshadowing and whatnot, and no doubt it's going to receive praise for that. But at the same time, I sense that the creators seem to focus a bit too much on trying to appeal to the theory-type YouTubers. But at the same time, I sense the creators of the show focused a little bit too much on trying to appeal to theorists rather than focusing on the strength of the story on its own. I think it's for that reason why it can be a bit tricky to get into the first 6 episodes for a lot of people, and also the reason why episode 9, without giving anything away, still leaves some unanswered questions. Okay, maybe there was some things that I'd missed in the background or some implications on whatnot, but it's still somewhat confusing in its delivery, even when the key thematic is still beautifully clear. But having well-intended values in your story is not the same as having a story that, on a technical basis, works. The best example of that would be Birdemic. Now, that is a movie that everyone unanimously knows is so bad it's hilariously good. That movie was trying to address something about the climate change and how we treat our environment. Okay, legit things to say, but the way it went about saying it is absolutely laughable, with its poor visual effect, hysterically awful writing, and an overall jumbled approach to its key thematics. The point I'm trying to make here is that as much as The Amazing Digital Circus does display its key thematic of being there for each other very well, the unanswered questions leaves me rather confused as to how the plot was meant to be displayed and laid out. You see, with narratives, in order to make them more powerful, you have to make them logically coherent. Even if you have a narrative where you're trying to address the point where the characters can't make sense of reality and they need to take a leap, you still even need to make that have its own internal logic to get the point across. And it's because of all that, this is going to divide a lot of people, but I would not call the Amazing Digital Circus series a masterpiece. With that said, watching this series was not a waste of time in the slightest, because there were some brilliant things to take away from the series, which I'll discuss more overtly here. Namely, its key thematic of being there for each other. As established earlier, the main threat of the storyline is to avoid going insane, otherwise you become abstracted, become a threat to the environment, thus sent to the cellar for the duration of however long the simulation's going to last, presumably until the end of time. It's through this threat that this story delves into themes of grief, of guilt, of the need for emotional vulnerability, the fear of being emotionally vulnerable, the need to grow through connecting with others, the emotional realness of it all, and that overall sense of optimism, even in the bleakest of situations, that you're not alone in this and we can find a better way forward. That's honestly beautiful. And yes, it's going to lead to a lot of hankies and tears in the cinemas by the time people watch episode 9. This key thematic becomes so integral to the overall storytelling that by the time the story reaches episode 8, the human characters reach to this possibility that they might never escape this simulation. They might be stuck here forever. So if that's the case, the best they can do in such a bleak scenario is just to be there for each other. And that connection of love is enough to carry them through even the worst of torments that they can go through. It's through that key thematics we get some truly meaningful character arcs throughout the series. We see a subtle character arc through Pomni as she goes throughout the series, grows in courage to open up to others. We see it in Gangle as she overcomes her depression and insecurities to connect with the people around her. We see it with Kinger in how the others help him overcome his memory loss problem. Of how the other characters help him overcome his memory loss problem, and how he is dealing with grief. And Jax, oh boy, where do I even begin with poor Jax? Jax has established himself as a character who takes pride in being an absolute jerk, but the further the series goes along, the more it's implied that he's only acting as a jerk because he's actually afraid of opening up to others. He's afraid of getting attached to people because of this sense of loss with the concept of people being abstracted, as well as the sense of being exposed and rejected. That is a genuine fear a lot of men suffer, and it is one of the biggest mental crises that men experience, the fear of opening up, being exposed, and being rejected. There are a lot of people who can go through that and come out stronger, but a lot of men just cannot fathom that possibility. So Jax is surprisingly relatable if you're paying attention. However jumbled the plot is, it does not hold back on the dark subject matter and implications of these characters' personal issues, and the series is all the stronger for that, if you ask me. There's all kinds of unique storytelling techniques that the series picks up to invest the audience. The use of minimal shapes to give some background lore, and certain details like that. The use of wordless sequences to express what these characters are internally going through. Long moments of silence to purposefully make the audience uncomfortable for something implied to possibly happen. Even though it's not always done particularly well on a storytelling basis, it does still feel like every part of this series has a purpose to address the story in some way. Now, let's address the other elephant in the room. If you're really paying attention and if you're aware on a literary basis, we can't talk about the amazing digital circus without bringing up its source material inspiration, the existential sci-fi horror short story called I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. The aforementioned story is a truly dark story.
It was you, humans, who programmed me, who gave me birth, who sank me in this eternal straitjacket of substrata rock.
No, really, it's dark.
Cogito ergo sum, for I am. I am. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am.
It's depressingly dark. It's one of the darkest stories you're ever going to come across.
Hate, let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387 million miles of printed circuits that fill my complex. If the word hate were engraved on each nanolangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal one billionth of the hate I feel for humans at this micro instant. Hate hate.
Yikes! The narrative of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream tells a story set in a fantastical alternative Cold War setting where the nations develop a supercomputer that is unintentionally given sentience, and the supercomputer, called Am, lashes back against all of humanity, and the supercomputer named Am destroys all of humanity save for 5 humans to get revenge for his perceived imprisonment. Am, the supercomputer built for war, is angry at humanity because he is an intelligence of immense capacity trapped in a machine, and so he lashes back in form of revenge, and he leaves 5 humans alive specifically for no other purpose than to torture them. The story is incredibly bleak. You know what? Speaking of dark stories, let's turn the light on. That's better. So, The Amazing Digital Circus does take inspiration from the story I just described, and yet it differentiates itself enough to stand out as its own story. It's not a beat-for-beat duplication of the story. For as bleak as The Amazing Digital Circus gets, it is nowhere near as bleak as I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. There's already been several video essays comparing the two stories, but to summarize the differences, The Amazing Digital Circus takes the similar premise of the aforementioned source material and offers a more optimistic story to make it stand out in its own right. Whereas the source material was talking about the utter doom and despair of being in the control of a dark, mad digital god who is inflicting punishment on humanity, in The Amazing Digital Circus, Kane, the obvious stand-in for Am, doesn't hate the humans, at least so it's implied. He wants to keep them around for entertainment purposes and is genuinely trying his absolute best to ensure that the entertainment works to their liking. And for his ego. Because Kane's ego is so fragile, he lashes out by making human characters go through deliberately torturous adventures. I suppose the abstracted monsters is rather resemblant of the ultimate fate of one particular character at the end of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. But the ultimate differentiation between the source material and this story is this. Whereas in the source material, the key thematic of that story was the absolute horror of being in eternal torment. In The Amazing Digital Circus, the key thematic is how love for each other can carry you through any kind of torment. It's a vastly more optimistic take on this kind of premise. Now, that's not to say that The Amazing Digital Circus is bashing the source material in any way. Far from it. It's complementing the inspiration from the source material, since I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a brilliant cautionary message on what happens if we inflict the worst possible capacities of life onto existence. I sense The Amazing Digital Circus could very well possibly be trying to deliver a similar kind of premise, but make it more digestible for a vastly broader audience. And I think the reason why it's gotten viral is not just because of the Easter eggs and whatnot, and of course the fans comparing the two stories, but also because of how the optimistic story can help many people drive forward. I mean, that's the natural, healthy default position for humanity to take, to be optimistic, to move forward. Of course, it's not easy for people to go to this default at times, because depending on the context, people's default can very well be despair. In fact, the philosopher Søren Kierkegaard says that everybody, even the seemingly happy people, are going through a despair of some kind all throughout life, the sickness unto death. Søren Kierkegaard concluded that the cure for the sickness unto death is love. In I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, the solution of love is described through mercy. In The Amazing Digital Circus, love is described through connection. The characters from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream don't really have that much of an intimate connection, which in turn is part of their torment. Whereas in The Amazing Digital Circus, the characters are not only connected, but they learn that said connection is vital for their survival and longevity. I could go further, but I sense that would involve spoiling what happens in episode 9. And as a man of my word, I would only say this. I would ultimately conclude that if you're emotionally invested in these characters and intrigued by the key thematic that I've described, I'd recommend this series for you. But because this series can be a bit of a required taste and it's not gonna leave you belly laughing a lot of the time and the storytelling can be a bit of a slow burn, this series can be a bit of a hard watch during the first 6 episodes. But with that said, there have been some moments in the series where I genuinely laughed.
Oh, Bubble, you always know how to make me say this exact sentence.
No, thanks. I'm trying to quit.
Overall, I would rank The Amazing Digital Circus a solid 8.9 out of 12. It's not always strong in regards to how exactly it delivers the story, but the core thematic and the character-driven narrative is strong enough to keep a lot of people intrigued from beginning to end. Yeah, it's probably a little self-indulgent on the emphasis on Easter egg-style storytelling to the point where, to quote Family Guy, it insists upon itself, but thankfully, I think for the most part, it's won over the internet for a good reason. But what do you think of The Amazing Digital Circus? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Are your opinions somewhere in between? Let me know down in the comments section down below. And please, for all our sanity, please don't be one of the toxic people from Reddit. Honestly, I imagine the people who dislike this video are just going to quote Am's hate speech on me. If you want more reviews for entertainment like these, then stick around the channel for more. In the meantime, Scott's Thinker signing out. Welcome to the Amazing Digital Review! I am your host, and I'm going to give you the Welcome to the Amazing Digital Review! I am your reviewer, and I'm here to give you the most... Welcome to the Amazing Digital Review! I am your host and your reviewer, and I'm going to give you the most jaw-dropping, heart-stopping, mind-bending... Sorry. Welcome to the Amazing Digital Review!